So I'm still trying to do that while writing at the same time. Nancy is kind of oversees the consumer reporters. I think this is the simplest way to put it because it's confusing as hell from the outside looking in. It really is. She kind of works with Ed Begg, he's based out in New York, Mike Snyder in DC, Brett Molina in DC, and Jeff Graham in LA. So they are our product people. They know the stuff inside and out. They write for the consumer audience. And on the other side, I'm working more probably with Marco De La Cava, who's fairly new to what we do. He's a tremendous feature writer. He does a lot of profile stories. He's based out here. So is Beth Wiest, who's taken over the security beats. So she's going to be writing a lot more about that. And then there's Jessica Ginn, who just joined us. We're very fortunate to have her. She is a tremendous hire. Exactly. You guys know her well. Everybody knows her. And she knows everyone else. So what we're going to do is, with her and with Beth, we're going to start moving into non-consumer type of coverage. So we're going to start doing things like series and serious long-term explanatory journalism that you're going to see more of it. I can't give you any details about what Jessica and Beth are working on, but it's going to be a really, really spectacular series of stories that are going to start in a couple of weeks. We've already started a series called Dark Web, which is emanating out of the East Coast, which is John Hilkirk and Susan Weiss, they're enterprise editors. So we've done several stories on the dark side of the web, and we've had about 4 or 5 of those. That's going to continue the rest of the year. On the flip side, Jessica and Beth are going to start on this series involving Silicon Valley, which will start very soon. So that's it. One thing I also want to tell you is, even though our paper has a higher circulation than ever before, we don't really consider ourselves a paper so much as a website. In terms of coverage, the paper's the last iteration of what we work on. What we try to do is we try to bang out stories as fast as possible, then build on those stories until the final version ends up in print. Where I think our circulation is near 5 million, and Nancy will tell you why it's so high now. It's part of this other project that we've been working on. So there's a lot of things going on. We're actually also going to be adding people. We added Jessica. We're going to add Laura Mandara, who comes from Market Watch. She's going to be in an editing position. And then after she starts, somebody who you know very well is probably in all likelihood going to join us. I can't say who it is, but I really look forward to it, and he's going to be helping us on the non-consumer side. So that's kind of the overview. We also have a lot of freelancers, which can be confusing. They write on the weekends. We have a lot of people from other parts of the paper who are contributing to tech coverage now. So our editor-in-chief, Dave Calloway, wants more tech coverage on the front page. He wants it throughout the paper. So he's recruiting other people to write for us who have expertise in other areas such as crime or the environment, what have you. So a ton of video for us. She's on national television all the time. This is John Chenal, who's our columnist, who writes 2 or 3 times a week. Sarah Ver, who's with TechCrunch now, but she did a lot of startup coverage for us, and this is Nancy Blair. So how about this? I'll just throw this out. What do you guys, well, I'll start with Nancy actually, about the whole idea of what we're doing with print and why we have more readers, even though you probably don't know how we did it, but maybe we can explain that.
Sure, it actually there's some kind of larger issues about how USA Today relates to the rest of Gannett that kind of come into play with this, not only on the print side, but on the digital side in terms of the local property websites and our broadcast division, which is large and growing. So even though we do consider ourselves very much a digital-first organization right now, one of the more interesting experiments of the past year involves us now producing a section of USA Today. It's sort of a mini edited version that gets inserted into most of the Gannett properties now, 7 days a week. We, in effect, become their national news report. And what that does for you guys is give you a lot more eyeballs for the companies you represent, for us in print. One example, we call this thing the butterfly edition for one reason or another, but papers like the Arizona Republic, which have a very large readership, and others, get this section of USA Today on Sundays that didn't exist before. So, and that, I think the circulation just on that edition is at about 2.5 million now. So that's 2.5 million copies of the paper that didn't exist a year ago. And on the broadcast side, we're incorporating more and more of the reports from the local TV stations into what we flow across usatoday.com. Tomorrow, for instance, the Amazon event in Seattle, King 5 there is a Gannett property, and we're going to be using their crew for our video report. So it's very interesting. Laura, the woman that John mentioned who's coming in in an editing role, will be working primarily for a desk that we call Nation Now. It isn't even terribly clear to us exactly what they do, but again, it's an idea. They do a report every day that gets fed across all Gannett properties. It's supposed to be sort of social and buzzy, and very cross-departmental, news, lifestyle, business, etc. So the bigger idea across Gannett is to kind of harness USA Today and ultimately kind of evolve this thing as sort of a USA Today network, and that's part of what Laura's going to be involved in.
Yeah, so I do commentary in a column, so it's not news. You know, the main thing when I decide whether to write about something is, can I write about it, write a story that no one is going to read anywhere else. There's no value I can add by just regurgitating the news. So it's analysis off the news, or a lot of times it's a trend that I see in Silicon Valley. It's a trend in the tech industry. You know, the whole Silicon Valley meets San Francisco kind of lifestyle thing, like the Google bus issue, related things, those are very interesting. Things I could add value to. I'm writing actually about 3 or 4 times a week now, getting up there. So it's pretty frequent. If I do write about a startup, it's almost always in context of their market, not just the startup itself. So for instance, last week we did a thing on data miner, but written in a way that shows that it relies on the Twitter feed. Maybe it's something Twitter should have been doing. For our audience, it's a lot better for several reasons. If we can equate what's happening with the startups in the Valley or here with the big public companies. My background is in business news from Bloomberg and Business Week, etc. So I'm interested more in the strategic angle, what it means to the company. So if it's a product announcement, it really has to be something strategic. It's rare that I'll write just about that somebody has launched a product, because we have people who do that very well. There's no reason to duplicate that. Let's see, security, that's a big one that's coming more and more for all of us. And then I have a series this year that's essentially called The Future of Work, looking at a bunch of different industries. Let's see, we've done healthcare, we've done the tech industry itself. What was the first one? Can't remember. So essentially taking a look, you know, a decade or two in the future, how is technology going to change different industries? There's ones coming on media and advertising. So if there are consumer experiences that you know about with companies that you represent, and they are truly groundbreaking, and they are doing things that no one else is doing, allowing consumers to do things, interested in that. Then the last theme is really investment and what is good for investors. I used to write strictly for investors at MarketWatch. It's a little broader audience now, but for the most part, you know, the strategic impacts on either investors or consumers. So not just, you know, point product stories, but trying to tell the bigger picture through analysis, etc., and not just the news.
He wants the story as soon as possible online. He wants something called the first take, which is like 300 words. It's like your first impression of something. Or he wants something a little bit longer, like a news analysis. So he wants different types of digestible content centered around that can be packaged together. So that's something that he's kind of drilled into our heads. Before we didn't do that. Before we were kind of fixated on doing cover stories and longer term stories that were interspersed with breaking news. Now it's really heavy duty breaking news type of influence. Now I didn't mention Jen, but you all know Jen. I know you
Right.
probably mentioned that earlier, but
I don't think I did, but Tech Now is twice a week. It's a column and a video. And what it has morphed into since we've started doing it, and Nancy is my boss, is very consumer tech. So you take the ideas, you take the new gadgets, the new products, and then everyone in the, from here to New York and everywhere in between, it's what they should know about it, what they should care about, if they should care, what they should spend their money on. It's really bridging that gap between the concepts in the Silicon Valley and everything that's going on in the Silicon Valley and all the rest of the people in the world who need to know about it and need to make choices and decisions based on these products that are, as we know, very life-changing. And so it's a lot of wrap-ups. It's a lot of top 5 gadgets that do this, or this new technology that does that. I have a lot of personal interest in digital parenting, so a lot of it becomes about that. And I go around the country and do TV shows all the time, and it's like I'm at Gannett stations all the time, and they're all airing and running the videos and the columns every week.
You know, one thing we're going to try to do more of, we started it this year, was doing live shows. So at CES and South by Southwest, and maybe even at E3, we'll have a couple of people doing a live 30-minute show, which they produce, and they do it live on the air. And it's Jeff Graham, Mike Snyder, and Brett Molina when he's part of it, Ed Begg as well. So we're going to try to incorporate more of that, so we have more of that visual element in addition to the stories. We're trying to make it as well-rounded as possible, and we're trying to go in as many different directions as we can. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a work in progress. I mean, it's chaos most of the time, but I mean, it's creative chaos. It's more of is we need younger people who cover startups, who go to events at night, who know what, who find out and learn about things. Things like that. Okay, TechCrunch does it, but that's what she did. And you know, I regret that I don't regret that you got the job. I'm glad you got the job, but I regret that you didn't.
Yeah.
You can't keep doing it for us.
Well, yeah, you have to make a choice if you're full-time somewhere. But I really enjoyed being able to have the opportunity to write for USA Today when I did. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole, so TechCrunch is obviously a little slightly different than USA Today. USA Today is writing for, a lot of the times, a general audience to kind of explain a bird's eye view into the tech world. What's, you know, I mean, it's it's everywhere in our modern society. I mean, technology's kind of taken over. So, you know, USA Today focuses on, like, what does this mean to our everyday lives, whereas TechCrunch is focusing on, you know, the tech community, you know, tech culture, Silicon Valley culture, and it's a slightly different readership where it's very hyper-focused. You know, you're talking about writing, you know, 3 or 4 times a week. I'm supposed to be writing 3 or 4 times a day. Right now I'm up to 2 times a day, so we'll see how much faster I can get on writing, but I'm pretty new. This is my 4th week on the job, so give me a little break here. But yeah, I mean, the focus for me is, it's kind of nice because the kind of content that we're charged to write about at TechCrunch is whatever you're interested in that has something to do with our audience. And so I have this opportunity to go to lots of different SF events, find the crazy stories. I wrote a story about tech communes in the city where these people have bought these houses and they're making money on these communes. It's like an upgraded, you know, hippie idea with 20 people in the house, and they're all programmers and they're making their apps and they're sharing meals and kumbaya, and it's just sort of insane. And it's only what happened in San Francisco, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I like to focus on. That takes a little bit longer than maybe, you know, a story I'd write today. But again, you know, you find people, young kids in the Teal Fellowship, you find kids at Combinator, you find, I just came from a biotech conference in Mountain View where this lady was talking about reviving extinct species and making mammoth burgers. I mean, there's just crazy stuff, you know, that, I don't know, I'm hoping that's not her entire goal, but, you know, cooking a dodo, I don't know, that's sort of, I don't think that's I would be afraid, but that's the kind of stuff that I tend to focus on, that I get to do rapidly every day. If I'm lucky, I can find something really awesome, and I do. I mean, so far I've been really grateful in that, but that's, I mean, this is like a rapid change. So, you know, speaking of digital first, we're digital only, and we're super fast, and I've been very impressed with the team that I have that work so incredibly fast at breakneck speeds, and I sometimes wonder how they even got this story and how they're getting so many so fast. But I mean, it's an amazing team to work with, and that I have an opportunity to be with.
This is a TechCrunch version of our panel right now. It's probably covering some sort of live events. I mean, that's probably where we really excel, but I'm wondering if there's any type of other things that we want to do more of, that we haven't done enough
On the consumer side?
of. Either side. Consumer or non-consumer.
Well, I think you would say that one of the things that we've been focusing on now are some of the sort of, big get interviews with some of the high-profile newsmakers. John did a nice piece with Michael Dell last week, looking for some more of those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like one of the things I'm always kind of cognizant of, and I think we all fall within the trap, is we're trying to do stories with the names who are well known. That's why Marco, for instance, did something called Change Agents, which is basically people before they become famous, like rising stars or people who might create some sort of impact on a market. So we're trying to do more of that, but it's hard to break out of that whole type of trap. And I'm wondering if we should probably try to do. I think we're going to probably push harder on that, but that's going to be kind of a calculated risk in writing about something that you guys aren't familiar with, because we're beholden to traffic. Just so you know, when we have a new meeting in West Coast time, one of the first things that we go through is we go through the top 5 stories in terms of traffic, and it's usually based on if there's a Kim Kardashian story, if there is I'll tell you, I'm almost, I'll tell you anyway. I was embarrassed to tell you this, but was it the Miley Cyrus, when she was grinding on stage or whatever she was doing? Yeah, I'm too old to understand that. But anyway, that was by far the biggest story. And I remember our editor-in-chief was saying something to the effect, it's a shame as I'm saying this, run it into the ground, baby. Just keep it running, keep it going as hard as you can. So that's an admission, but there are also stories that are the top 5 that are actually good stories, like legitimate stories. So never underestimate the audience.
Seems to translate into the news world as well. I mean, people like that more if you add a little bit of color in it. You kind of put that passion behind it.
It's hard though, because if you've been trained to write a certain way, you almost feel like this kind of reflective jerk when you do it. And you try to figure out how far you can push it. If you push it too far, then somebody goes, "Oh, you're an asshole for doing that." And sometimes they're right. And other times you push it just a little far enough. Like I did something on innovation and mentioned this in Apple, and I kind of mentioned that they cringe every time their word's brought up. They physically cringe when you bring that word up around them. And I thought they would hate that column, and as it turns out, they actually liked it because it was said with some sort of text or context, and it was said within a kind of a framework. That wasn't the lead, that wasn't the end. That was just part of the larger story. But it's something that's an acquired knowledge, and it's rewarding. But it's going to be. I think we're going to do more of it. We just got to be careful on how we do it. Dad, just send it to me. I'll farm it out. I won't tell people to write it, but I will send it along to the right person.
And I just want to add, if you are pitching every single USA Today person just tell me, because I get a lot of what I think are great pitches, and then I don't know, because I'm not in a daily meeting. I don't know that Jeff is already covering it, it's already covering it, somebody else. So just be open and honest and transparent about that. It would really save me a lot of time.
On the consumer side, just kind of roughly, we were asking about this earlier, and we're a relatively small team, so that there aren't extremely clearly drawn lines sometimes. Ed Bay, based in New York, is our main consumer tech product reviewer. He also takes a ton of briefings from a ton of companies. And Ed has evolved from a guy who 5 years ago, his job was to produce 1 column a week. He writes easily every day, sometimes more than that. He writes news, he writes analysis, and Ed sometimes has a hard time saying no, so he's a great guy to pitch. Jefferson Graham down in Los Angeles he's got a couple of passions. He's become something of a video reporter, self-taught. He covers a lot of camera news. He does gadgets well. He does a lot of web services. He does a lot of kind of LA-based tech scene features. He is also, if you represent companies elsewhere across the country, Jeff from time to time will go out and do sort of Heartland tech community stories. He's in Phoenix this week, as a matter of fact, taking a look at the Phoenix tech scene. Mike Snyder, based in our McLean office, focuses primarily on sort of where tech and entertainment meets, on both the hardware and the services side. He's just started writing a new column for us on the weekend about for folks who are interested in saving on their cable bills. It's kind of a cord-cutting column. He's been writing a lot of content stories around that. He did a piece this past weekend about it was a World Cup, some World Cup stuff, and
it's Jessica, for you, we're going to have her just cover Google and Facebook. She's going to have her hands full with that. And in terms of the major companies, there are like 5 companies that we cover to death. Amazon is the other, Twitter, Samsung more increasingly, just because they're involved in head-to-head competition with a lot of the companies that we write about already. Microsoft is something that's becoming more relevant, so we're going to start covering that more. The thing we're going through is we get our marching orders from the East Coast really early, so we are scrambling every morning trying to catch up with what their demands are, their requests. So things for us kind of settle down by noon until the next wave of requests come in. So that's kind of the way we operate. So in the morning we're like probably pretty frenzied, and tomorrow will be another one of those types of days. We're like big in the Midwest and the South and even the Northeast, not so much on the West Coast. So we have totally different audiences and totally different interests in what we're writing about. So it's like a balancing act. And there are times I think Nancy and I are like balancing 6 or 7 stories at the same time and just losing our minds, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And it's like landing planes. You know, it's like there are like 7 planes coming in on the runway, and you're trying to get them all to land smoothly without crashing into one another or circling the air pad. I mean, that's to me the biggest challenge, and always will be. And there's more interest than ever among the editors back east. You know, they are also sometimes of the opinion that we just pick up the phone, like the bat phone, and call Bill Gates and say, okay, what about this? You know, can you tell us a little bit more about this? We're USA Today, you should be telling us this. So that's kind of one of the traps you also fall into. So we kind of have a lot of masters we're trying to answer to.
I mean, the problem with that, though, is I think you need to be doing your research to target your pitch more than that, because if you're sending it to everyone, maybe your idea is not so focused that it's of interest to one person. And
I don't think any of you guys do that.
I get that John said,
Claire Booty
or
on the other
Nancy
hand.
said you should cover this. John said you should cover, I get a lot of that now.
That's called passing the buck.
Yeah. I know it's crap most of the time, it's not true.
I'm curious, is it...
No.
No. I usually ask for that information after the pitch.
Sometimes I use it. I mean, sometimes I'll ask them to send it to me with the company background and with some just basic information, just to save time. So I have to. Yes, Ann?
I start my day with USAtoday.com.
I read the New York Times every morning.
I read that.
That's actually not a bad one, actually.
Twitter.
Twitter's the best wire service in the world. Yeah, I read that every day. I read that all day, actually.
I have a list of people that I keep that are really forward-thinking people, you know,
Yeah.
on Twitter, and I read those. I see what they're talking about.
No, absolutely. Twitter. That's the best. That's the best news source by far.
Tech memes, another good one.
Yeah.
Tech meme. Kowalski, I'll think of it.
The Guardian and Reuters Tech News at the beginning of every day, because usually because of the time zone thing, they're halfway through their day already, so usually they'll have more than just the news. They'll have some type of analysis already up, and I don't want to duplicate that if I'm writing off the news analysis.
I like to find out what's on the leaderboard of product trends.
That's
I know editors back east read Market Watch.
so we.
That's an inside joke. Every time Market Watch runs something, oh my God, did you see what they just did? That's, sorry, that's a little bit too close to home. I'm just going through a little catharsis right now. I'm all right.
New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Those
Journal, yeah, the
start
journal's
my
great,
day
yeah.
With tech, CNN, what, for TV stuff.
CNBC is a good cheat sheet, right? You know the funny thing too is like the irony is that we have more readers than ever with our prints. We kind of almost treat it like a stepsister or whatever, stepbrother, and yet every company that ever talks to us, whether it be Apple or the smallest startup, insists that they be in print. It just, and every time I mention it back to the editors back east, they kind of dismiss it, or they just like, oh, that's nice. But I have to say that there's not one company I can think of that doesn't want to be in print, and it's like this. It's a strange thing. It's like Google, Facebook. They're all obsessive about it. I'm not sure whether that ever is going to change.
And I would actually say as well, there's a big opportunity for tech stories in our print section. There's a huge appetite. We seem to kind of fill the money section those days.
Yeah, we do. It's like the tech section. It's not really the money section anymore. You know, there's a weekly that we have called USA Weekend. That reaches 22 million people. We're going to start using that as a carrot to get people who are difficult to land as subjects for profiles. I won't say who, but that gets the attention. When you say 22 million people on a Sunday as an insert in numerous papers, I've been using that, dangling that in front of Apple and Google, and it's actually something we're going to start doing more of, actually, in the coming months.
We're sometimes shooting video 4 to 6 weeks before it actually airs. 4 to 6 weeks, especially if you're pitching back to school, Father's Day. 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Poor Nancy has to deal with, hey, what about this idea? And I'll get it in by Friday. I think it can run on Saturday. And there's a lot that you have to do with video that you might not think about. And just, these guys deserve so much credit.
So I'm going to try to...
You know, on the consumer and the product side, we can debate embargoes and pre-briefs all day long. You know, to the extent that they make our lives a little bit easier, it's really kind of almost on a writer-by-writer basis, you know, what the preference is. Again, you know, somebody like Ed Baig is juggling a ton. If you could get on his radar early, that's better, because he's just got a lot that he's trying to manage and schedule. And anything that you can do ahead of time with him in particular helps us make sense of the unexpected announcement.
Which happens every day, by the way.
You know, but personally, in the past year or so, I've been doing more writing, and I have no time for that. I try to kind of fill in some content gaps on the consumer side, like in mobile hardware, some app stuff. And for me, you know, if you can let me know about something that I might be interested in at least a week ahead, again, so that I can factor it into the 10,000 other things that I'm doing every day, very helpful. But there really aren't any hard and fast rules. Pre-brief, you know, a day before isn't that massively helpful unless it's like huge and you're giving us a break on it.
I think we're out of time.